Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today to hear more about Southern Africa. Um, my name is Danielle Coco. I'm the marketing director at SUSTA. I know I've spoken with about all of you who are on today, but if not, I look forward to meeting with you and speaking with you. Um, Today, we are going to hear from Zircom International. Zircom joined SUSTA's list of in-country consultants at the end of 2023, and they cover the entire African continent. So, we really think that Africa is kind of the next frontier for U.S. agricultural exports and a great market for our companies to be looking into. As you can see here, it's a continent of over 1.4 billion people, and some of the fastest growing economies in the world. Not that that's anything new to you, but just to explain, why we're really focusing more and more on Africa, and not just SUSTA. USDA is really making Africa a priority. So we are excited to spend more time learning about the continent. Naturally, it's not a monolith. Each country and each region is quite different. In 2024, SUSTA is hosting a series of webinars on Africa featuring Zircom. In March, we had an hour and a half webinar that really covered more of an overall picture of the continent. And then, of course, today we're focusing on Southern Africa. In June, we have a webinar scheduled for West Africa, and then we'll talk about Africa and North Africa later here. Keep an eye out for those webinars. And to find all of our educational events and opportunities, if you go to our events page and you select this Export Education tab and you just look down, you'll see West Africa here. And then we also have consultations with all of our in-country consultants as another resource for you. So if you register for one of those consultations, you'll be able to speak with the team at Zircom individually on Zoom. They're usually about 30-minute calls. So just something to keep in mind as you explore Africa, and you might have more questions and specific questions for your company and product. Other than that, everybody is on mute. If you have questions throughout the presentation today, please just write them into the chat box or the Q&A and we'll address them. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Zircom. Richard.
Hi, very good. I'm going to start screen sharing right now. How are we doing? Can we see that, Danielle?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, everybody. And what I'd like to do first is just to introduce some of the panelists on the team. We have Faith Okolet, who's based in East Africa in Kenya, and she's our agricultural program manager. And she's just joining us today as on an observer status, but she's an important member of our overall team. And then we have Sikinyiso Maka, who, hi Sikinyiso, how are you? Right, so she's based in South Africa, but originally from Zimbabwe. We have Namari D'Souza from Angola. Hi, Namari.
Hey, Richard, can you hear me?
Okay,
Yes.
and then we've got Nathan LaRue, also based in South Africa there, and he does a lot of our project management overall. I think I'm frozen.
Oh, no, we hear you. Oh, Richard, I think you're okay. Can you hear me? Great. Folks, just bear with us a second in case Richard is frozen. Technology. Sure is great when it works. All right, Richard will probably join us in a second. All right. Here he comes. Hey, Richard.
Apologize for that.
Yeah, no worries.
I think we're still, okay. Can everybody see the screen?
It looks like it's about to come up.
Tell me when you can see it, Danielle.
Got it.
Okay, perfect. The first thing I'd like to do is have Seek and Yiso give an update from the NAMPO show. NAMPO is the largest agricultural trade show in the Southern Hemisphere. And so maybe Seek and Yiso, if you could just give a few words where you're sitting there at the show right now.
All right. Thank you, Richard. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm live. We are live at the Manampo grounds, which is the biggest agricultural show in in Southern Africa. Like Richard has just said, there are a number of exhibitors. There are quite a lot. We are seeing agricultural equipment exhibitors, international brands, Cassid, John Deere. They are here. They're exhibiting massive machinery. We also have a number of animal feed ingredient manufacturers. Some from international companies. We have seen some from as far as from France, and they're not much of food processors, exhibitors. Actually, there's a lot of food around the show, but that's it from us. Yeah.
Great.
I'm just going to try to do a quick fix. Faith, can you just give a quick update on our role with SUSTA around Africa? And I'm going to see if I can try to get our internet fixed very quickly here.
Real quick, Richard, do you want me to share the presentation? I have it. That might help with your bandwidth.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I'll do that.
What's the Wi-Fi password for your phone?
Okay. All right, Faith, can you see my screen with your presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
I can. Yeah. So, all right. You can move to the next slide. All right, great, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. Richard, are you back? Let me know when you
I'm
are
just
settled.
trying to switch past Wi-Fi systems here. So I might
Okay.
just vanish and then I'll come back in just a second.
All right, okay. All right, so as he mentioned, Zircom has been around for over 5 years. We have this is a map of Africa, and the stars that you see on the screen. Then
Oh, sorry. Did I?
no.
Shoot. Sorry.
I'm just
Okay, there we go. Yeah, so that's our staff coverage. We've been serving US exporters since 1999. And you can see we have a good sort of coverage of the continent, having representation from the north, east, west, and south. We do have the main office that's down in South Africa, in Pretoria and in Durban. So this just gives you an idea of our coverage. We have good representation. So we can move to the next slide. So I think Richard wanted to just quickly start off with just the trends and the relative population size. So Africa is a huge continent. There are about more than 1.4 billion people on the continent. And this sort of animation is a picture of how the population is moving. And you can see eventually we will have the largest population in the world. Will be based here in Africa. Next slide. So the focus of this webinar today is, as Danielle mentioned, we're doing a series on the different regions and starting with the South African Custom Union. And this is the oldest custom union in the world, been in existence since 1910. And the countries that these are in green on your screen are South Africa, Botswana, Eswatini, which was previously known as Swaziland, Lesotho, Namibia, Mauritius, which is not highlighted, but is on the side, the right-hand side of your screen, and Mozambique. So it is the oldest union, also known as trade bloc, if that's the language that's more familiar to you on the continent.
Thanks, Faith. I think I've got my my transfer done properly. Unfortunately, you know, these computers, they decide to flip over from one system to another, and you're not actually, and when you're traveling, you have all kinds of things come up that you're not expecting. So thank you so much, Faith, for pulling that together. Yes, so the SACU, or the Southern Africa Customs Union, is a part of the customs union that is now, we're not moving here.
Oh, I'm the one driving it.
Oh, you're moving it. Okay,
Yeah.
next, please.
There.
Yeah, so the Southern Africa Development Community, which encloses the Southern Africa Customs Union, is quite a large block of countries. And we have a grouping of 15 countries that belong to this group, 16 now actually. And we are, it's been in existence since the 1960s, and it really is functioning more and more as a trading bloc, where the Southern Africa Customs Union was sort of the core starting group. But SADC started as an anti-apartheid movement of countries that were opposed to South Africa's dominance in the region. And eventually now SADC is the key institution for the region. So next, please. We see that with a population of getting close to 400 million and a annual GDP of getting close to $1 trillion per year in GDP. It's quite a power block region in Africa. And you can see the countries listed and their various populations there. So the largest one really is the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is closing in on 100 million people. And then South Africa is next in terms of, or Tanzania is next, but South Africa is next. So both of them with around 60 million in population. But if you're looking at the disparities, we have countries there that have relatively strong personal per capita growth and levels. So you have Botswana, Mauritius, South Africa, which are really middle income countries. And then you've got countries which are relatively low, but very quickly growing. And so we see countries like Lesotho and the Democratic Republic of Congo. But this also provides a variety of market opportunities for American exporters, because often we find that sometimes a particular company may be best applied into a higher end processed food market, or there might be something where staples would be involved, and so corn or flour might be sold into one of the other markets where there's a big population of lower income. So there's always something to be said for each country, and even inside the countries with the lower income, we have to remember that there is a population of 1 to 2% of the people which can afford relatively, you know, a middle-class lifestyle. They can afford imported products and things. So where you have a company that does export high-end processed foods, the Democratic Republic of the Congo may still be interesting, because you're going to have 1 or 2 million people which are going to fit your demographic. Next, please. Now, with all of the different trading blocks across Africa, we're finding that they're typically being pulled into the African Continental Free Trade Area. And this is one big common market with over 1.4 billion people in it. So it's the largest common market in the world, surpassing China, surpassing India in terms of the size of the market. And presently, everything is integrating. So we're seeing a lot of integration along common trading requirements, phytosanitary requirements. So as the years go by, this is a project that you'll see is very similar to the formation of the European Union. And as we're seeing the years go by, we're seeing more and more coming together of the different regulatory bodies from across the continent. And eventually we're going to see commonalities in a lot of the important protocols. So as you're exporting to Africa, understanding one market, one regional market, is going to allow you to understand several of them once once time has passed and we're deeper into the integrative process that the African Continental Free Trade Area is providing to a lot of companies here in Africa and in the United States, of course, as well. So next, please. So one thing that if we look at Southern Africa, and we call this region the anchor of Africa, if you look at where the companies that have more than $1 billion in revenue, you'll see that there's 147 in South Africa alone. And if you add the ones in the Southern Africa community into the mix, you've got almost half of the entire very large corporate companies in all of Africa based in the region of Southern Africa. So once we add Angola, Mauritius, the DRC, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Zambia, a few countries like that. But interestingly enough, we've got Angola, and Angola is an interesting country because it's got 9 of these multi-billion-dollar companies. And I'd like maybe, Namari, if you could provide just a little bit of commentary about the Angolan market, because it's one that has developed very quickly, and it's one where there has been a lot of really interesting commercial applications that make it much easier for American exporters to bring their products in and develop that market. So maybe, Namari, if you could provide a few words about your country.
Hi, Richard, can you hear me? Hello, Richard?
Yes?
Can you hear me, right?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The Angola market is growing really fast. We have, as you said, we have like big companies here, and we have a lot of them trying to come in. And we are open. There is a lot of opportunities in the market. What is that? Can I say?
Maybe about the large number of commercial retail grocery stores that have come up in the last decade, because Angola does have a very good value chain in terms of bringing company products from all around the world into their market.
Oh, sorry, I didn't get your question.
Well, let me just explain. Angola has a very strong cold value chain. There's a lot of ability for logistics. Logistics have improved. The corruption in Angola has been diminished substantially, allowing prices to come in at much lower than they have been in the previous decades. And the middle class has been growing. And so we're going to be expecting good things out of Angola. Namari, do you have any further comments?
Yeah, exactly. As you said, even the government is implementing a lot of programs that to attract the investors from the outside. Private investors are the best ones. There is some different policies that have been changed just to attract other companies to come to the country. And some changes even in the country infrastructure also have been made just to receive these new companies that want to come.
Great. So maybe I'll just point to South Africa, and thank you, Namari, for those comments. Angola is one of those up and coming countries that, very interestingly enough, also is sharing a lot of interest with the United States. It is a Portuguese-speaking country primarily, and but what is interesting is a lot of the younger people, like Namari, are very fluent in English, and so it's getting easier and easier to get involved with that market. But South Africa is a longstanding regional powerhouse with a lot of potential, and we're going to be discussing later in the presentation and showing some of that strength in terms of the grocery chains, in terms of the agricultural companies that are involved in the market. But maybe we'll have, maybe Nathan, if you could just give me some commentary from the NAMPO show about the agricultural sector, and if you've seen any of the very large agricultural feed companies there.
Greetings, everybody. Yeah, as Richard stated, yeah, at the NAMPO show, it's been incredibly busy. Things got started very, very early today. I think there were lines stretching for a couple of kilometers at around 6:50 a.m. this morning just to essentially find parking here at the NAMPO show. But yeah, as Richard has said, we've got a number of food companies here at the show, as well as also agri-tech companies. And so, yeah, just something that
Nathan, I think we're kind of losing you.
You've got to talk into the microphone.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, speak
Hello?
right into the microphone.
Okay. I'm going to try and keep it short here because I think I'm also competing with the local radio station, which has been blasting around the show throughout the day as well. But yes, there are a number of feed companies that are exhibiting here at the show, as well as also, of course, a lot of agri-tech companies. But yeah, at the show, I think for American exporters, for those that are involved in renewable energies and smart climate, agri-technology, and agri-tech, to certainly find opportunities here in South Africa. That is indeed in abundance. With our national elections just around the corner taking place on the 29th of May, many political parties have also stated that South Africa want to focus on some of the largest sectors that have really helped to support South Africa's growth. Many know, of course, mining in South Africa as being one of the foundations of fundamental sectors in South Africa, but of course agriculture as well, which is a major employer of individuals here in South Africa, which is therefore becoming a big focus for us. And of course, looking at our exports out of South Africa into the rest of the world, also being key. So any ag-tech companies that are interested in working in South Africa to help us also reach these goals, we certainly find opportunities on the side.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you. Next slide, please, Danielle. So what is really germane to a lot of this are a lot of the new trade corridors that are developing across Africa, which are really important to a lot of the logistics, the traffic that's coming in. We're seeing a lot of populations connecting into the interior, and not only allowing for imports, but exports as well. And so a lot of what's happening right now is very interesting. We're seeing greenfield railways and ports and highways being built across the continent to interconnect a lot of Africa. So with the infrastructure development, we're seeing a lot of these trade corridors happening. And in Angola, one of them is the Lobito corridor, which is just kicking off with large amounts of financing, and there's going to be a railroad built across the continental connection right into Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And that's going to open up a lot. If you know what's happening in Africa, that area where you see the nexus of a lot of those railways, that is prime mining real estate. That's where most of the metals for your mobile phones are coming from. Botswana has 23% of the world's coal reserves. There's a lot of things happening in the center of the continent which haven't previously been connecting. And this is going to be rising Africa in the long term. There's a lot of connection, not least to say that within the agricultural sector, Africa has 60% of the world's available arable land. So there's a lot that's going to be happening right across the agricultural sectors, and that means a lot of American companies are going to be able to come in and work with food processors here. They're going to be able to add ingredients as the middle class grows, and we're seeing a big opening up. It's almost like the opening up of the American West, if you can imagine that, but on a much larger scale with a lot more people and a lot more money involved. So very interesting. So next slide, please, Danielle. Just very quickly, we just want to point out that although Southern Africa has the largest economy overall of all the different regions of Africa and the most sophisticated and diversified regional economic base, the growth is lowest. And that's typically because the other regions are coming from a slightly lower base, but we do have countries that are reaching middle income, such as Kenya, that are continuing to grow very quickly. If you look at a list of the top 20 growth economies in the world, you're going to see that Africa has just over half of them. And in terms of national economies, well, Southern Africa does have a relatively slower growth at around 3% expected in the coming year. And some of the other regions, if you look at East Africa, for example, is looking to average at 6%. West Africa, which we'll be presenting next month, is coming in at close to 5% next year. So Africa overall does have very fast growth, but generally, because of where South Africa is in terms of its developmental stage, it's got slightly lower growth. We're going to see probably after the next election, we're going to, and I'll be discussing this again later in the presentation, South Africa's at a bifurcation in the road, a fork in the road. And so we're going to be seeing either things will move very quickly in terms of bringing investors in and probably push growth up to a very fast rate, or it could be static as we see now. Okay, next, please. Just another graph that shows where that growth is coming from. And we're looking at a lot of growth in the services sector. So just like around the world, we're seeing a lot of growth dependent on services, but typically in Africa, a lot of this is dependent on the digital services. So interestingly enough, a lot of people think of Africa as a resource-based region, and yes, it is. There's a lot of mining here, a lot of energy here, a lot of agriculture here, but the keystone earner for a lot of countries now is tourism and digital services. So we're seeing the middle class come up, and we're seeing diversification of things happening, and we're seeing a lot of young companies driven by young people building into a lot of the very good ideas that are circulating around the world. They're picking them up quickly, and they're finding capital to start their firms and get things moving. So this is really what's driving the interest. And I would also say that agriculture, the growth in ag here has been very consistent to typically supply a lot of local requirements because of the growth in the population that Africa is seeing. But also when the disruption happened relating to the Russian war, which is still going on, the companies here have been very good and quick to respond. And so we've seen a big response in Southern Africa in the agricultural sector to the demands requiring local inputs and export markets. So the agricultural sector in general is going to be growing. And so if you're supplying food ingredients into Southern Africa, or if you're planning on doing that, then come and talk to us. That'd be probably a very good idea. So we can see that particularly in South Africa, we're seeing this happening all the time, and a very robust agricultural sector. A bit stymied by government bureaucracy, but it is a very good market and one to interact with. Next. So very quickly, just one thing to point out is that whatever you hear in the news, the investment climate is generally very good for South Africa, and we can see that there is a lot of positive net flow of investment coming in from foreign sources, and this means that in general people do have a very good view of South Africa from an investor perspective. So I thought that I would put that in there. Thanks. Next. And in general, we do have, and we're getting now to the crux of the presentation, agricultural imports into the region are going to continue to grow at a very fast rate. And so we want your companies to be part of that. We want you to understand that we've got a very good growth in terms of the real growth in the market. And you can see that going from just 10 years ago and then looking 10 years in the future, the entire market in real terms will have doubled. And we're looking at a very good growth rate. And when things are growing like that, small and medium-sized companies can come in and take advantage of a lot of the positive disruption that's happening. Big companies and even the local small and medium-sized companies can't fill all the gaps. There's a lot of new products that people are demanding, and people are looking for different tastes and things. So as we're seeing this overall growth, there are places where small and medium-sized companies can really fit in and start establishing a brand in local markets. Next. And just quickly, and thank you, Sikanyiso, for supplying this right before the presentation date. But these are some of the bigger areas where our American exporters are doing very well into Southern Africa. And so we see that meats are very good, prepared meats, there's beverages, edible preparations, processed foods effectively, fruits and nuts and seeds. But really, if you look right across the board, there's a lot of opportunity for companies. And I would also like to say that when you're seeking a new market, make sure that you're looking at the right country markets, because even within Southern Africa, as we saw with some of those statistics, there's a lot of disparity. And so if you're looking at coming in with a high-end processed food or something that is maybe very particular, but really destined for per-class tables, then maybe we have to focus in on Mauritius or the Cape Town market particularly. If you're looking at food services, we have to focus on where the market is growing in tourism and hospitality. So again, we might want to look at Cape Town and Johannesburg, maybe Botswana. So we have to, we're here to help you find what is right in the market in terms of placement for your companies. And we want to make sure that these kind of growth areas that we're seeing are going to be positively fixed into your own company's books as you start making sales. So talk to us again as you're looking to get into new markets. Next, please. So just very quickly, the top 5 grocery chains, and we didn't get into a lot of the medium-sized ones, but the top 5 alone have 10,000 stores in the region. And if we were to look at all of the the key chains, we're probably approaching a number like 20,000 store units, and that is a lot. So there is a good demand for everything to fill the shelves, to fit things in. And we're seeing a lot of the American style of shelf placement coming in. So a lot of companies, although they are, some of these companies do buy and import directly, but others will sell to distributors, and then it's up to those stocking distributors to be putting the shelving together, and systems that American distributors are very familiar with. You're probably familiar with them yourself. And so we want you to understand that we do have a very good complex playing field in Southern Africa, with many, many thousands of store units, with at least 12 very good large grocery chains that are interested in new product lines. And then there's a few hundred good distributors who are looking at specialty distribution of foods in the market. And those range from high-end companies that specialize in certain types of food to other companies that are maybe more focused on specialty types of foods that are demanded by their clients. Others focus on the low end of the market, and they're more commodity companies. And there's a big food services industry with over 150 companies that we have names for. So there is a good market for products in the region, and Southern Africa cannot be ignored when you're looking at that. Next. So just very as an add-on to that, inflation is really being driven by the cost of food that we've seen, not only from the pandemic, and then we've seen the food disruptions from other parts and places, and also the Suez Canal partially closing because of the war. We've seen that food prices are continuing to be the primary driver of the cost of inflation, and you can actually just see this from the graph. Fuel is not really inflating the prices of things; it's food inflation, and so all of those things that go into that are part of it. But if you're a U.S. exporter and you're aware of this, you can make that price sensitivity work in your favor. And we're at a point where right now, if you're watching the currency markets, the US dollar is just starting to get a little bit weaker. So we've seen the rand improve about 5 or 6% in the last 2 weeks. And this is an expectation that the American interest rates will be dropping, and then people will be able to get higher interest rates in South Africa, for example. And that move alone means that your products are 5% less expensive in the South African market. So as you're watching those currency markets play out, it's important to look at that. Next, please. Just very quickly, where are we going with a bit of climate change in the region? So you can see in the red where things are dry, they're going to get drier, and where things are wet, they're going to get a little bit wetter. Next. So generally, this is going to mean that the agricultural economy of Africa is going to improve. Interestingly enough, for parts of the area where you see a big decrease, Africa, where you look at northern South Africa, Namibia, that region is on top of one of the world's largest aquifers. There's decades of water underneath that ground. So it's not going to affect too much if the farmers have access to that water. And we're seeing that Namibia is now becoming a primary area to grow table grapes, which require a lot of water. And where are they getting that water? Well, they're not getting it from the very seasonal rains, but they're getting it from the aquifers. And they're very careful about how they apply irrigation in these dry regions. So generally, the agricultural trend and where things are going to be going. Yes, there's going to be some disruption with the climate change in the Southern Africa region, but I wouldn't expect it to, and also like Australia, our region is prone to years with heavy rains and then heavy drought. So this is also something that the market is used to. And so coming in with the right kind of product in the right year is also very important. Next. And then I want to just maybe give you a quick list of the 9 companies that are based in Southern Africa, which are the top 20 of the food companies. So of the 20 top listed food companies in Africa, 9 of them reside in our region. So about half of the large companies. So Tiger Brands, a big company, AVI Limited, both of them are multiple big groups which hold a lot of different requirements. They buy huge amounts of food ingredients. Oceana is a firm that focuses on seafood. Then we've got 2 sugar firms next, Ilovo and next, Danielle. Yeah, and Zambia Sugar. They're both tied in with the sugar industry, so they don't really do a lot in terms of purchasing imports, but there's some things that they do. Premier Foods, another good big general holding food company. RCL, another big general company with a lot of different firms being distributed. Next, please. And then Astral and Innisfor. So we've got a very good range of very large buyers, but there are hundreds of companies that are making food, but the market is very consolidated in South Africa. Most of the food in South Africa, about 80%, is manufactured by about 12 companies. And this is very similar to the consolidations we've seen in the United States. So be aware of that. And this is something where we want you to get in touch with companies that are supplying these. If you're providing food ingredients, we want you to know that there is a good established market of companies that have been in the market, some of them for many, many decades, and they know exactly what their people want, but there's a lot of newer ones that are coming in and championing new things that are happening in the market. There are a lot of foreign companies that are trying to get into the market. And this is something that we're seeing not just in Southern Africa, but the food processing industry is growing very swiftly across all of Africa. And so it's a good one to look at. Next, please. Just a word about the elections that are coming up, and I know that Nathan alluded to this already, but we've got elections in South Africa coming up within a very couple of weeks, a very few days, and it looks like South Africa is going to go from one where the majority of the people are voting for one political party to a place where we're going to have coalitions or maybe work with a minority party. And this is going to have big potential for altering the political landscape, but it's also going to mean that if things move in a certain direction, South Africa could possibly end up in a much better space. Next. So there are a large number of political parties that are contesting the election. And we've got the incumbent African National Congress, which has been diminishing its support, particularly in the urban areas, and with internal issues relating to corruption. They're having to deal with that, and they're getting pressure from both the left and the right, although it's very difficult to make these definitions work for African politics when we try to compare them with an American political stream. But we're going to see the center, if that would be where the ANC is sitting, ally either with the right, typically to form a coalition, or with the left. And if they form with the left, we're likely going to see South Africa's economy creating a more of a static look. If we see that they're forming with the center and more of the political parties that are more concerned with economic growth, then we're likely to see South Africa's growth go over 5%. So with a large increase in investor interest. So watch the elections very carefully. The coalition formation is after the elections. In the next couple of weeks after the elections, we're going to see a lot of horse trading going on, and it's going to be a very interesting thing where it's possible that we're going to have a government that may have 2 or 3 parties in it, and other parties are going to form a different type of opposition to what we've got. In South Africa, we have a completely proportional type of governance, and so the party lists are formed specifically on how many what percentage of vote you got, and then exactly based on what percentage you got is going to be what your representation in parliament is, and then the ruling party elects the president. So this is we don't have a separate election for presidency. The parliament creates the president out of one of its members, and so this is how the election is created, and we're going to see a big change there at this juncture. And likely within another 5 years, we're going to see that change being consolidated. But after 30 years of the African National Congress, it looks like there's going to be a very swift change happening in the governance of the country. Next, please. So we do have a few country slides that are that I'm just going to gloss through very quickly. We've already discussed Angola. Next. Botswana, it's a relatively middle-class country, very organized, one of the lowest crime rates on earth, fantastic place to visit, a lot of tourism in the center of the Southern Africa region, some of the best game viewing, and it is a country that owns and manages a lot of the world's diamond reserves. And like I mentioned earlier, 23% of the world's coal reserves, relatively untouched because there hasn't been railways going in and out of there, but you saw that the railways are being built. So Botswana is likely on the cusp of a big economic breakthrough, but it's only got a population of 2.5 million people. So it's a place the size of Memphis, with a population the size of one large city. So next, please. Democratic Republic of Congo. It's got a very big population, depending on what statistic you look at. There's a lot of estimates out there, but one of the poorest countries in the world, but one with a lot of potential. And they do now have a relatively good government, which hopefully is going to be bringing in a lot of investment. So let's see, it's a country that I've had the pleasure of living in for 3 years. It's a bit chaotic, but it's one where even in the chaos, there's money to be made. And while I was recently in Angola, I met with 6 companies, 6 grocery chains that were based in Kinshasa in the headquarters. So there are opportunities and a demand for American food, even in this country. So never look at the statistics and just decide on an average based statistical analysis that this isn't the place for you, because statistics always hide the nuances that you might be interested in looking at in terms of your own sales. Next, please. Malawi, I don't want to call it a quiet backwater, but it is a smaller country with a lot of tea plantations. Agriculture is one of the key country earners, and there's also a lot of tourism based around the lakeshore. Beautiful mountains there, but typically a smaller country. Next. Mauritius, one of the fastest growth rates in the world. At independence from Britain in 1968, it was one of the poorest countries in the world. Now it is at the top of the middle class and hopefully getting into the upper class of countries. It's got over 100 4- and 5-star restaurants, a lot of resorts. So if you're in the food services industry, this country plus Seychelles is one that you cannot ignore. Next, please. Mozambique, one of the fastest growing markets in the world, sitting next to South Africa, a lot of resources there that are just starting to be exploited, and a lot of agriculture that's being grown. So keep your eye on Mozambique. And it's a Portuguese speaking country, but recently in the 1990s, they joined the Commonwealth. And so people there are learning to speak English a bit more. And it's becoming, it's a beautiful place. If you like white sand beaches, it's the place to go for a holiday. Next. Namibia. If you enjoy the desert and you want to see some of the most fantastic sights in the world, go there. A lovely place to visit with not quite 3 million people. Again, a market the size of Texas, but it's very small population. And so there's, it's also one of the driest countries in the world, creating a lot of opportunities for different kinds of agriculture, very specialist types of agriculture. And there are a lot of people there in the middle class who are looking at their own diets, which are changing very quickly to accommodate what they're learning on the internet, and a very large tourism industry. If you can understand that, a beautiful place to travel, and a lot of people, especially from Europe, visiting there all the time. Next. So South Africa, I don't think we need to go into this too much again, made up of 9 provinces, and we were discussing this a lot. So let's go next. Tanzania, another country in the, it's a bit of an overlap country because it is in the Southern Africa Development Community, but it's really more of an East African country. So I'm going to let our East Africa team maybe deal with that one a little bit more, but one of the fastest growing countries in the world, and a lot of opportunity there, particularly the mining sector is growing very fast. And if you want to go to one of the most beautiful places in the world, go to Zanzibar for a week. Next. Zambia, very fast growing market. They've come through a period of relatively high corruption, and the new government has taken the day and has really tried to manage itself away from a lot of their previous problems, particularly with Chinese finance, which was kept very secret and under the table. But Zambia is a country that really is working hard to get closer to the United States. They are a really nice English-speaking country, as are most of the countries in our region, by the way. The Congo is the one that really has the fewest English speakers. Angola is even learning, young people in Angola are learning English. Namari, is that correct?
It is, Richard.
Thanks.
That's why I'm trying to.
Thank you. I appreciate you being on. And the last one, Zimbabwe. Now, this is Sikinyiso's home country. Sikinyiso, do you have a moment just to tell us about what's happening in Zimbabwe and give us some of the key points?
Okay, Richard. Thank you, everyone. Yes, I come from Zimbabwe. As shown there, we really are a country of about 50 million people, and the economy is not performing well. It has its ups and downs, but generally it has been on a decline. But yeah, the capital city is Harare, and agriculture is the backbone of the country.
Thank you. And if you're if you're coming to Zimbabwe, what are some of the sites you'd want to see?
The Victoria Falls, of course. The
Very
Victoria
good.
Falls, you can visit it from Zambia or from the Zimbabwean side.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So add Victoria Falls to your Zanzibar itinerary, everybody. So I think we'll close it off now. And if there's any questions, we've got about 5 minutes left, and we're looking forward to discussing things with you. We're really happy that you joined us. We do have one of the more fast-moving and interesting markets in terms of the emerging market world, and we have a very confident team that's out there ready to help you out in the field. So thanks for your listening, and we'll take questions right now.
All right. Pull up our Q&A. All right. Is there a market for forest products? And if so, which country would be the best market?
Yeah, so we've done a lot with hardwoods, and we find that hardwoods have a very decent market in Southern Africa in terms of the buyers. So even inside South Africa, we have a list of 40 companies that do importation of hardwoods, and about 15 of them are relatively decent buyers in terms of regular buyers from all parts of the world. So there is a market. Softwoods is a different story because Southern Africa creates a lot of softwood for pulp and different things. Another thing that differentiates our market is that we do not have houses that are made out of wood frames. Our houses are made out of cinder block and bricks, and so it does create a smaller market for softwoods. So forest products, there is a good market if you're looking at hardwoods. Typically, softwoods, I would say it's somewhat limited, but we tend to have a relatively good market. The United States has a decent market share, but it could continue to grow. And I think that with the US dollar looking like it's going to be falling, we're going to see Americans grabbing up a bit more market share away from Indonesia, Brazil, some of the European countries, hopefully soon.
Thank you. Next question. How acceptable are plant-based products, especially bakery items?
Good question. And we're seeing a move toward the same dietary requirements that you're looking at in the US, gluten-free. We're looking at all kinds of different things. If you're looking at meat substitutes, actually, it's a tough market in Southern Africa because there are good companies working in that sector already, and so it is a really good market with a lot of good food processing. So if you're looking at coming in, maybe you want to supply specialty ingredients. Maybe you've got a specialty product with a high level of differentiation that can work out in the market. All of our different regions of Africa have something different to offer. South Africa is the one with the strongest food processing sector, as we saw with that list of the big companies that do the food processing, and they're very hard to fight on price. So keep that in mind. But plant-based substitutes are becoming of more importance in the market, and something we'd be glad to discuss with if it's something you're interested in.
If your product is of Africa origin but produced in the US, is it a good market?
Well, maybe Danielle, is that something that we can work with through SUSTA?
Well,
That's
I guess
a good question.
right. I mean, it would depend if it's made, if it's an African type product but made from US agriculture, then that's something that SUSTA could work with. But yeah, I mean, something that's being imported from Africa, we cannot.
Yeah. Again, if you're round shipping something from Africa to the US and then back to Africa again, it's going to add a lot of costs. I think that's one of the main issues you've got to work with. But I mean, there's so many things that are made here in Africa now, it's hard to say, and we would have to know what you're talking about because it's something very particular. But that's something I would say I need more detail on before we would come back with an answer.
All right. This looks like our last one for food products. Should we contact those big supermarket chains, or do we need to find a local importer first?
It depends on what you're looking at and what part of the market you're trying to find. A lot of those big chains don't do their own importation. They rely specifically on importer distributors to purchase from. So while some of them do have their own direct import people, others do not. And so it's when you come in to look at the new market in South Africa, you'd want to play both sides and see, get some contacts from the distributors, get some contacts from the retailers, and then see and try to decipher how your algorithm is going to work for you to maximize your sales. If you get one really big company that wants to buy a lot of your product and they're willing to do it as a direct end buyer, then maybe that's the way you should go. Or if you get a distributor that's going to be distributing it across the country and you're going to find your product into a range of retailers, maybe that's the best way to go. Typically, it's the second one. So there are, like I mentioned in the program, a lot of different companies that do import distribution for food, and you know, we've got good lists of those companies. So again, it will depend on what you're looking at and how you want to look at it strategically. But that's a good discussion point for bringing up in any market that you go to. So thanks for the question.
Great. Well, I feel like we really packed that hour full of information. It's a large region. It's quite diversified and interesting for our companies. So thank you, Richard, and your team. A great hour spent for our companies, and we look forward to hearing about West Africa in June.
Thank you so much.
All right.
We'll talk to you all later.
Sounds
Bye
good.
now.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.